Hi all, a very good morning and happy Sankranti festival to one and all. So it's been a little while, we had a good break in between and then we are going to continue back to our sessions. So in the part of our today's topic, we are going to get started with the cloud front, which is the last part of our application services. So we learned about SQS, SNS, Kinesis, Elastic Transcoder, VPC Direct Connect, VPC peering, and a lot of other application services. But this was one of those part of the S3 services where we had in the part of our course syllabus. We were about to learn this with the S3, but I just moved it to the part of application services. So here it is, the CloudFront. So what does a CloudFront basically do? So before we can understand the CloudFront, I'll just give you an overview of what is called as CDN, that is Content Delivery Network. So once we have an understanding of what is Content Delivery Network, what are they used for, it is easier for us to understand the CloudFront and how to set it up. So what is CDN? So CDN basically stands for Content Delivery Network, and it is basically a system of distributed servers that deliver web pages and the other web content. So it is basically a distribution where you have a lot of servers in which you are from where you're going to actually deliver the web pages and the web content to a user based on its geographic location, origin of the web page, and the content delivery server. So we are going to take care of three different things. Where is the user based out? Where is my server being put up? And where this content delivery server is going to be. So based upon these three factors, we are going to work on with CDN, which is going to deliver the web pages and the other web content. Now to understand this a little more, let's get into the example. Let's see here. So I have got a server which is in London, right? So the geographical location of the server is now London, and I have got lots of users across the world who try to access the web server of this London. So some of them are from North America, some of them are from the South America, some of them are from the Africa, some of them are India and Australia. Now, if any one of these wants to access the web page, they have to go ahead and hit straightly towards the web server which is in London. Right now, the people who are in South America or in Africa, they really have very poor internet connection and they'll not be able to easily connect through. So it is going to take a lot of time for them to access any of the web page. So for the people who are in Australia, India, or in the America, for them, yes, the internet connection is a little better. So at least they'll be able to access. But yes, there will be little still delay because now the person who's in Australia stays very far from the server. So by the time he's going to access the web page, there is going to be latency. The person who is in US can be able to navigate much faster than the person who's in the Australia. So how can we actually improve the situation for everyone across in this world so that the web server which is in London can be used with much efficiency? So this is where we actually get with the edge locations. So the first terminology in the CloudFront is about edge location. Now what is the edge location? Edge location is basically a place where the content will be cached. Now if you see across in this world map, now I have got some red boxes all over. So these red boxes are nothing but edge locations, and these edge locations are the place where the content is going to get cached. So it is like a short-term memory for this, for the main London web server. These are the places where it will be stored for the short time. Some content of the web pages will be stored for the short moment of time. So they are like edge locations, which are like called as mini data centers or something as such, where we can actually cache the data and store it for certain time period, which we can define. Now what happens in this situation is, the first user who is going to hit the request, let's say if someone from Australia wants to access my web page in London server, so he will hit the request, and that request will be first routed to the nearest edge location to see if the content of this web server is cached here or not. If it is not cached, then this edge location is going to pull down the content here, and then the same will be displayed to the user. Now whenever the second user is trying to access the same page, his request doesn't need to travel anymore all the way to the London server at all. The web page content is actually cached inside this edge location, and the same can be given to the user who is in the Australia. So this, every second user is going to get a benefit. The first user will still have to bear the latency. So now the same happens with the people who are in Africa. The first person has to bear the latency because his request is going to go down to a nearest edge location, and that edge location is basically going to go ahead and check out if the content is already cached. If it is not, it is going to pull the content and then put it across into the edge location. Now whenever the second user is going to access, he doesn't need to travel anymore all the way to the main web server at all. So he can directly get the content from the nearest edge location, right? So this is the way how we can actually improve the situation for the people using the edge locations, right? So it makes really easier for any second person or the third person who is going to access the web page. Now there are a few more important terms that we need to learn about the edge locations, or CDN network we call it as. This is actually called a CDN. So we may need to learn few more important components before we can actually move down and do it in the practical part of the lab. Now here we learned about few terms, but only we got introduction to first one, that is about edge location. So we now know what is edge location, right? So edge location is basically a location where the content will be cached, and this is separate to AWS regions and the endpoints. Remember AWS regions and the availability zones. So those are different from what is this edge location all about. Second, origin. The origin is basically the place from where the files for the CDN will get distributed. So in this case of example, what we consider, this web server is basically a origin. Sometimes you can also have it as a S3 bucket, or it may be a EC2 instance, maybe a load balancer, or maybe a Route 53 as well. So we are going to look across with one of the example in our practical part of the lab today. And then the distribution. What is the distribution? Distribution is basically the name given to CDN, which consists of collection of edge locations. Now you really need to have a collection of edge locations, because if you see these edge locations, I cannot go to each of this single location and put my content into this, right? So I basically need one single service, which is called as CloudFront in AWS. Using this CloudFront as a service, I'm going to configure in such a way that from this London web server, I'll be able to distribute the content across all the edge locations across the world, right? Distribution is nothing but this is a name given to the CDN, which consists of collection of the edge locations. So now the CloudFront can be used to deliver the entire website, including the dynamic, static, streaming, and the interactive content using the global network of edge locations. So using this, it's not just the static web pages, but we can also deliver the dynamic web pages. We can do the streaming. We can also send across some interactive content using the global network of the edge locations. Right? So whatever request is being sent across from the user, it actually is being redirected to the nearest edge location, and from there it is delivered with the best possible performance onto the CloudFront. So now let's get started by looking into the practical part of this. Okay, so I'm into my AWS console and I'm going to go ahead and open up the CloudFront service. Click on the services here, scroll down the page. Exactly in the networking and content delivery, you will be able to see the CloudFront as a service. Now, either you can directly go ahead and click on the service here as a CloudFront. Now, are you guys able to see the screen? Okay, so just go down to the AWS console on the home screen, and then you will be able to see through, which is called as the service called as CloudFront. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. So I already got one of the CloudFront established here. So I'll let you know the reason why, because it usually takes 15 to 20 minutes to set up the complete CloudFront distribution. So I already kept one of them ready here. So anyway, we are going to make use of the another as well. We are going to create one more, but since it takes a lot of time to get started with this distribution, so I'm going to showcase the example here with one which we already have. However, we are going to create one more. Now, the very first step in this CloudFront distribution is all about creating the origin. So as I said, there could be any kind of origin in this case, right? So what did we do? We just went into the services first, and then in the networking and content delivery, we opened the CloudFront. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and click on create distribution. So there are two ways in which we can set up this. One is for the web distribution and second is for the RTMP. RTMP is basically the short form for real-time media processing. Now, we do see a lot of real live matches or the live Olympic games or something, right? So how does this basically happen? That is basically help of RTMP distributions. However, in this case, we are going to set up for the web distribution. I'm going to go ahead and click on get started. But here, now the first part is about origin. So the moment I'm going to click on the origin name, it is going to ask me for a S3 bucket. So first, let's go down and create one of the S3 bucket and then come back to the CloudFront distribution. So I'm in the Amazon S3 here. Let's go ahead and click on creating a bucket. So I'm going to name it as AWS Training 2018, and this is going to be part of, let's say, Mumbai. There we go. We have been able to easily create through the bucket. Now what I'm going to go and do is upload any one of the image onto this. So let's go ahead and add one of the file. So I'm going to go down to my pictures section. From this, I'll just go ahead and pick up some of the images. Maybe let's say this one and this one. So two images are getting uploaded and they are successfully being uploaded to my S3 bucket. So the first thing to remember in S3 is any object that is uploaded to S3 is basically private in nature, right? So we need to open up to make it publicly available, right? Which means even if I go down to this image here and try to click on this link, it will not be accessible because it is private in nature. And in case if I want to ensure that people should be able to use it, I can make it public. But in this case, I don't want people to use this URL at all. I don't want them to know from where this content is basically coming, right? So I don't want them to know the name of the bucket, nor from the place from where it is being originated, like whether it's AP South one, or it is EU West one, or it is US East one, or something as such. So I basically want to restrict the content directly to be accessible. But how are we helping the users to access these images? We are going to make use of this CloudFront in this situation, which is going to help the people get access to this, right? So what I'm going to go ahead and do is come back to the CloudFront here. I'll have to go back. No, get started. Now you can see that the bucket AWS Training 2018 is now appearing. So I'm going to go ahead and make use of this S3 bucket as origin. Not just S3 bucket, I can also give ELB as an origin for this CloudFront distribution as well. For now, we are going to make use of AWS Training S3 bucket. And the next is origin path. Now it's going to ask you whether you would like to make everything in this bucket to be a part of CloudFront distribution or specifically some folder. Remember, we can also have folders inside this S3 bucket, right? So I can create the folders, and then maybe let's say it is like images, or maybe sometimes it is like videos, or maybe sometimes I can have it as logs, something as such, right? So I can actually go ahead and create the folders, and I can actually say that only this specific folder inside this bucket to be a part of this CloudFront distribution. But for now, I'm going to keep it blank so that complete bucket is being considered for the CloudFront distribution. Next, we have the origin ID, which is automatically generated since we are trying to use S3 in this case. So S3 hyphen the name of bucket. This is how the origin gets created. So if I'm going to use ELB, it will be something like, if I'm going to use load balance, it will be something like LB hyphen then the name of load balance, something as such, right? So it tries to generate a user-friendly name for the origin ID. And the next is restrict bucket access. Now, as we all know, we don't want the end users to be given this URL of the S3 bucket at all. They would be given the URL of this CloudFront distribution to access any image, right? So if they want to access the image of this peacock, I'm not going to give this link to them. I'm going to give them some other link from there where they will be able to access this content. So I'm going to say yes, restrict the bucket access. So they should not be accessing the bucket directly. Even if they access, they should be getting the error like this, saying that the access has been denied. So whenever I say restrict the bucket access, now it is going to look forward to see that someone should have access, right? Now, let me put it onto the notepad here. See, for the user, we are restricting the direct access in this case here. Right now, if you're restricting the direct access, so somewhere we need to have in between something, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an identity, and this identity is going to have access to the S3 bucket, which is going to help the user to go ahead and access this content. So this identity is something that we are going to create here, that is called as origin access identity. So because we are restricting the bucket access, we need to create this identity so that people will be able to access the bucket with the help of this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create user identity, and automatically the name comes in here. So it is very simple the way it comes. it says access-identity and then the name of bucket, that is AWS training 2018 .s3.amazonaws.com, right? So this is how the automatically the identity is going to get generated with, and it's going to ask you, would you like to grant the read permissions in the bucket? I'll say yes, please go ahead and grant the read permissions, because if I don't do this, I'll have to update the permissions manually, right? So rather than that, I'll just go ahead and say yes, please update the bucket policies automatically, which means I'm first creating the identity and I'm going to go ahead and set up the permissions inside this S3 bucket for this identity. So that is all done automatically. If you want to do it manually, all you have to do is click on the properties of the bucket, come to the permissions. In there is you have a bucket policy where you need to create your own policy in this case, right? So what I'm going to make use of is asking the distribution itself to go ahead and update the bucket policy, right? So for now, custom headers and the value we leave it as default, which is blank. So that was about the first part of the origin settings. So what did we do in the origin settings? We are just setting up which one to be used as origin for my CloudFront distribution. So in this case, we are making use of S3 bucket, and the origin ID automatically becomes the S3 hyphen the name of bucket, and we are going to restrict the bucket access, and we have created a new identity which is going to actually have the access to this content of the bucket, and the name of the access identity is access-identity-aws training 2018.s3.amazonaws.com, and we are also asking this distribution itself to update the bucket policy as well. Coming down to the next part here, we have got something called as default cache behavior settings. So what is this default cache behavior settings? So the first one we see is path pattern. So would you like to have all the content of this S3 bucket to be used for the distribution? Like sometimes you may want to just have the images, that is you can just say here star.png or star.jpeg or star.jpg, which means only all the images with jpg as a file extension can be used by this CloudFront distribution, not anything else. So for now it is default, which means everything inside this bucket, whether it is a PDF file, whether it is a image, or whether it is something else, right? So we are going to make use of this CloudFront distribution for all the different types of patterns which are being existing in this bucket. If it is JPG, if it is PNG, if it's something else, that's fine, but we are going to make use of everything in this case. Next, the viewer protocol policy. Now you might have sometimes seen that even though I go to flipkart.com like this, automatically it becomes HTTPS, right? So even if I try to go ahead and give it as HTTP, you see it becomes HTTPS, means it is trying to send me to the secured connection, right? So here again we have the viewer protocol policy in which we can actually set this parameter. Would you like the users to be able to use the HTTP and the HTTPS endpoint of your website, or would you like to redirect each and every one from HTTP to HTTPS, or would you like to use HTTPS only? Now sometimes what happens is if you give HTTPS only, so if someone is just trying to give something like this, right? Because if you see here earlier it was, I'll just do it again. Yeah, so if you just check it out a little while, what happened, it was just with the symbol I. Just check it out here, it will be with the symbol I, and then it becomes first. You're just trying to check it out on the HTTP endpoint whether this file exists or not, right? So it is always better that we give redirect HTTP to HTTPS, because we don't want anyone to get into any unsecured connections for my website. So if you see something with the Flipkart, Amazon, or any of the best dealing websites, they have already configured their HTTP endpoints to automatically redirect it to the HTTPS, so that the users are never being sent to any unsecured connection, and they are always sure that whatever details they're going to enter on this website is basically secured. So if you click on this here, it does show that any information like passwords, credit card information is private when sent to this website. So we can be 100% sure when we are going to save on when we are going to save any of the details on this, right? So it is always recommended that you use redirect HTTP to HTTPS in case if you already have got SSL certificates and the other options being done. Now the next is allowed HTTP methods. So when the CloudFront was first set up, right? So if we have seen this example, just we learned some time back. So what are people trying to do here? They are basically trying to access the server, right? So they're trying to get the content from the server. So sometimes it may also happen that these people want to upload something to this server. Like let's say this is a YouTube server and people want to upload some videos. It's not just the people only view, but some people also upload the videos. So can we make use of these edge locations so that the videos can be uploaded faster? Because as we know, when the download itself is very slow for the people who are in Africa and South America, we can just understand the situation how it will be for them to upload anything onto this server. It will be more pathetic situation for the upload speed for them. So can we make use of this CloudFront edge locations for uploading the content as well? Yes, we can make use of it by these methods here. So if I go ahead and say get head options put post patch delete, then this distribution can be used not just for delivering the content but also for getting the content back from the users as well. So people can put across the content, post or delete the content as well. So if they want to delete something on the YouTube, or if they want to, like let's say in our case it is S3 bucket as a origin. So if it is a EC2 instance like YouTube, then you can also go ahead and do that. For now I'm just going to keep it simple. I'll just keep it as get head and cache based on the selected requester headers. So yeah, so in this case we have kept the header values as a nil at this point of time. So if you want to go ahead and cache the content based on the headers, you can also do it. So for now we have kept it as none. And next we have the object caching. So as we all know, the object gets cached for a certain period of time, right? So how do we decide how much time the content is going to be on this server? Because the first user may access the content today from this London server. We never know when the second user is going to access the same web page. He may access today, maybe after next 1 minute, maybe after 1 hour, maybe after 1 week as well, right? So we need to decide how much amount of traffic do we have from the other countries, and for how long do I need to cache the content onto this CloudFront distribution. So here is something that we can actually customize it. So if you want to use the default values, you can just click on this itself. If you want to customize it, then it gives you a specific parameter called as TTL, that is time to live. So we are going to define how much time this is going to live across onto the CloudFront servers. So minimum is 0, maximum is 365 days, that is 31536,000 seconds. So this is the number of seconds in one single year. And if I consider it about 1 day, that is 86,400, right? So currently we are going to make use of the default itself, that is 86,400, which is for the 1 day. So any content that is going to be distributed from my S3 bucket, which is AWS Stream 2018, it is going to stay onto the CloudFront distribution for 1 single day. Next we have the forward cookies. For now we do not have any cookies or something as such, so currently we are going to keep it as nil. Query for string forward and cache forwarding and caching, again we are going to keep it as default at this point of time. Smooth streaming, since our bucket is currently having only images, so we do not have anything as such of a video content which can be used for smooth streaming. Specifically the smooth streaming is more applicable when you have the real-time media that is being delivered. So I'm just going to keep it at the default again, that is no. And then we have the restrict viewer access. So this is something that really needs to be understood here. What is restrict URL access? However, we are not going to implement at this point. I'm going to keep it as no. But what is restrict URL access? Now you may have seen the websites Netflix, right? Netflix or the Hotstar or Amazon Prime, which are the leading websites in terms of the media contents, right? So they just have got something like these movies or some show that comes up directly onto this websites which people are interested to see. Now, if I do not have a subscription on this Netflix, and if I go and say I want to watch out this movie which is bright, it will not allow me to see, right? So how is it possible if I want to see through? First thing is I'll have to go ahead and purchase a subscription which is for a certain set of price. So it would ask me something like if I go on to go with basic, or if I want to go with standard, or if I want to go with premium, right? So in basic I do not get much features. Maybe in standard I'll be able to go with the HD or something of that kind, right? So those are the different options I usually get through. And once I have subscription, I'll be able to view any content that is available on this Netflix. So if I want to see the Sherlock or maybe the Bright or maybe the Black Mirror as such, so I'll be able to view any of these contents. But let's say I do not have a subscription, my friend has it. So the moment he goes ahead and opens this Bright, okay, so he is going to, whenever he opens up any of the video, let's say this Bright is a movie or a TV series which has got certain episodes. So let's say he opens up the first episode in this case. Now whenever the first episode is being opened up, it would play a small, it would start a video on the screen. If you get a possible chance to open up the source from where the video is getting delivered, right? So I'm not sure if I'll be able to show through. I'll just try to show it for something like YouTube. So let's say this is a kind of video which appears like it is an example of a YouTube update. So what happens here in this case is if I go to the F12, just go ahead and click on F12 in your browser and you will be able to see the source of this page. Now if I go ahead and click on this video, so here is something that you'll be able to see. So it says that this video is being generated from this specific path, that is https://youtube.com, and this is some randomly generated URL, right? So maybe for the YouTube it may remain constant because it is the same video for all the users, and even if I share this link with you guys from here, you guys will be able to directly download this video. But in case of Netflix, it is going to generate a unique token. Because you are a subscribed user, it is going to generate a unique token for you, and that will be valid only for 30 minutes, and that will be valid only for you, right? So even if you are going to share this kind of source file to any other user who does not have any subscription, he may not be able to view the content at all, right? See, so he is going to get an error something like this saying that this page is not available or something as such, which means the token is actually getting generated and only the people who are authorized will be able to see it, and that is nothing but the signed URLs or the signed cookies, right? So signed URLs are basically helping me to restrict the direct access of all the users who are not a part of it, right? So with the help of signed URLs and the signed cookies, now signed cookies is basically something like this. If you have seen, I have got a lot of emails already configured. I don't have to go every time and give my ID password. I just go ahead and say Gmail, and automatically it will open it up for me because I have entered a Gmail ID password for the first time itself, and it has stored a cookie in my computer which already knows that yes, this guy is already authenticated and I can help him to directly access the email, right? So with the help of cookies we can do these kind of things, and with the help of signed URLs we'll be able to restrict the access in the other way around. So that is about the restrict viewer access. So it is really important to understand what happens with the restrict URL access, that is signed URLs or the signed cookies, which actually help us to restrict the data. And next is compress objects automatically. So would you like to compress the objects automatically at this point of time or not? Because we are using very simple example of S3 bucket. We may not require it to compress at this point, so I'll just keep it as no. And we do not have any lambda functions to be associated, so again I'm going to keep it as blank for now. So what did we learn in this part? The second one, that is about cache behavior settings. We learned that what all kind of path patterns we can send across. So currently it is default, which means everything in this part, in this bucket of S3 is going to be delivered. So it can be JPG, it can be PNG, it can be PDF, or it can be something else as well. So if someone really wants to use any of the part of this bucket to be delivered from the CloudFront, it can happen with the help of this path pattern. But if someone really wants to restrict it to PDF files, they can have star.pdf. And then the viewer protocol policy, we are keeping it as redirect HTTP to HTTPS, so that everyone is always on the secure connection. And allow HTTP methods, we are going to keep it as simple get head, and then we are trying to use the default TTL values itself. In this case, that is minimum is 0, maximum can go up to 365 days, and by default we are going to store it for 1 single day. And the rest of the options we have kept it as is. For the forward cookies, smooth streaming, restrict URL access, and the lambda functions, we have kept it as default. And the final part of this distribution is here, where we are going to learn about the distribution settings. So whenever this distribution is live, what should happen with it? Whether it should be in enable state, whether it should be in disabled state, or what should happen with it. So the first one is price class. So what is the amount that we are going to pay Amazon for this CloudFront distribution? So overall across the world, there are more than 75 or 80 edge locations. So would you like to use all the edge locations? Or if you are based in the US, maybe you would like to use only the US, Canada, and Europe edge locations. Or if you want to use US, Canada, Europe, and Asia, only those, you can select any of these three options itself. So currently we are going to make use all the edge locations, which means I'm going to make use of all the 80 edge locations across the world for this S3 bucket to be part of the CloudFront distribution. So anyway, it is going to cost a little higher if I'm going to make use of every edge locations, but as a part of free tier, do not worry about it. We'll be able to make use of it for 1 or 2 days, and then we can shut down our CloudFront distributions. And then WAF is basically the web access firewall. So currently we do not have any web access firewall, so it is not going to show me any options. So it is going to be none. And then it is going to ask me for an alternate domain name. So if you already have your own domain, let's say example.com or maybe netflix.com, so if you want to use that specific domain while the URL is being generated, right? So this is a URL which is currently for this image, which is like peacock.jpg, which is a part of this S3 bucket. But as I just said, we are going to replace this complete content here so that people do not get to know from where this content is being delivered and what is the name of that S3 bucket as well. So I'm going to remove this, and here it will be like example.com/peacock.jpg. So if you have got your own domain name, customized domain name, you can make use of it, or you can also make use of the default CloudFront certificate, which is going to be available in this case. So we are going to make use of default CloudFront certificate in this case and move further. And CloudFront also supports HTTP version 2, 1.1, 1.0, so you can directly go with the HTTP 2 in case if your websites are developed on HTTP web-based protocol with the 2. The rest of the options I'm going to go ahead and leave it as default for the root object. Login, we are going to keep it as off for now. So if you keep it as on, then it does ask you in which bucket would you like to record all the logs into. So for now, I'm going to keep it as off, and enable IPv6 is by default available for this CloudFront distribution at this point. And whenever the distribution state is being, which means whenever I'm going to create a distribution, whether it should be enabled or the disabled is something it's going to ask. So I'll keep it as enabled and then go ahead and click on create distribution. So creating the distribution really takes around 15 to 20 minutes of time, and sometimes the distribution completely to come into effect, it is going to take around some hours together, sometimes 4 to 5 hours or maybe more than that. So that's the reason I have already got one of the CloudFront distribution already set up for myself. So I'm going to show you what happens in this case. Now, considering the example of AWS training S320 or Amazon AWS.com, which is the name of the bucket, AWS training 2018, right? So this is the content that we just saw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and replace with this domain name, because we are using default one. So I'm going to go ahead and replace it. Right. So if I actually go ahead and access it, it should be accessible, but it is not yet, because as I said, CloudFront distributions will take minimum of 15 minutes to get started with, and after that it may sometimes take few hours to reflect the content, or maybe sometimes it happens in 15-20 minutes itself. So we are going to make use of this bucket, that is WordPress website media AWS training 2018 in this case. So let me show you what is available in that. So I'll go to this WordPress website media AWS training 2018, and inside this I have a folder with the name 2018-01, and then I have the image which is called walker.jpg. So if I go ahead and actually open directly this link, you see it's not accessible at all. It is giving me an error. So I'll share the same thing with you guys as well on the chat box, so you guys may also check out and let me know in case if you guys are able to access it, or it is giving denied access. So is it giving the access denied content? Right. So what we have done, it's the same thing is for our S3 bucket with the name AWS training 2018 as well, right? So the images that we have uploaded in that bucket also, we have said that we don't want them to be accessible publicly. But if I want to access this content, how do I do it? I have got my CloudFront server. This is the domain name. So I'm going to make use of this domain name and then access it via this one. So now I'm going to go ahead and click on this and just remove the place until this AWS training 2018. Right, I'm going to go ahead and put it here, because if you see 2018 is a folder inside this bucket, and then we have 01 and then the image with the walker.jpg. So I have retained 2018 01 and walker.jpg, and now if I go ahead and copy this link and post it to you guys in the chat box, you guys may now check the difference. So the content is actually being delivered from the CloudFront distribution, but not from the So it is not being delivered from the S3 bucket anymore. It is being delivered from the CloudFront edge locations. So the very first time you're going to access it may take time, but for the very second time, if you refresh it, the image will load much faster. This is because now the content is cached onto your nearest edge location, and it is going to ensure that the image loads much faster. Right. So the same case happens here. I have got edge locations across the world. So the first user who is going to access the image for the very first time, he may face the delay in accessing the first image, but after that the second person who is going to access the same image, he will be able to access it directly from the nearest edge location. So the content is now cached onto this edge location for the next 24 hours. So are you guys able to view the content? How about you, Shiva, Rahul?
Yes, Pawan, I'm able to.
Okay. How about you, Rahul? Okay. So we are going to learn few more things about the CloudFront distribution here. So we already have one of the distribution that is already set up. So you guys may also want to practice this lab. As I said, it is going to take minimum of 15 to 20 minutes for this distribution to already get set up. So currently it is still in progress, because as I said, there are more than 80 plus edge locations across the world, and in India we have two edge locations. One of them is a part of Delhi and second is a part of Chennai, and we have a regional availability zones in Mumbai. So the region is completely different from what we call the edge locations, right? So now we are clear what is CDN, that is content delivery network. We know what is a CloudFront distribution, and we also know how to set it up for our origins. So what all can be my origins? It can be a S3 bucket, it can be a EC2 instance, or it can be a load balancer as well, or a Route 53. So let's go ahead and click on this existing distribution here. So once the distribution is set up, when you click on any of the distributions, I have opened up the very first distribution which I already have in the deployed state. So it is going to give me general information about it. So this is the distribution ID, that is a unique number, and it is the Amazon resource name, and then it is going to ask me the delivery method. We selected the web. There are two methods, that is one is web and second is RDMP. And currently the distribution state is in deployed, which means it is already in use and it is making use of all the edge locations across the world, and the current state is enabled. And we are again using the default CloudFront certificate itself. That's why we are getting this randomly generated name here, right? So if we have already got our own CloudFront, if you have got your own SSL certificate, then here it will come like example.cloudfront.net, right? So we can actually customize the name if you have the SSL certificate with you. And security policies, it is basically using TLS version 1, and HTTP methods supported are HTTP 2, 1.1 and 1.0. And next, going down to the origins. So currently I have only one origin, that is S3 bucket. So if you want to add multiple origins to the same distribution, you can actually do it. So in this, now I can actually have some other load balancers if there are any. So currently I do not have. So if I want to go ahead and add some other bucket or some other something like elastic load balancer to be a part of the origin for this distribution, I can actually do it. So I can have a one single CloudFront distribution which has got multiple origins as well, right? So you can, it's not just restricted to one origin, but I can have multiple origins for single CloudFront distribution. So one can be a S3 bucket, one can be a Route 53, one can be a load balancer, one can be a EC2 instance, something as such. Or I can have multiple S3 buckets itself. So maybe in this bucket I'm going to pick up only the images, and from the second bucket I'm just picking up the videos, something as such I can also have. Now for each of this origin that is there, I can actually set up the behavior. So here it says, if this is the origin, what should be the behavior, right? So you can again go back and set across the behavior for each origin. So from this S3 bucket, I would like to get only maybe, let's say, images with the name star.jpg. So all the JPG images are going to be the part of this CloudFront distribution from this S3 bucket. Or if you give star, which means all the content inside this bucket is going to be used for the CloudFront distribution. So again, I'll just go ahead and say cancel for now. So you can actually create your own behavior settings for each of these origins that we are going to have. And then error pages. So in case if there is any wrong URL that user is trying to enter, and if you want to give a customized error page, you can just click on this and you will be able to create your own custom page here saying that, okay, 404 bad request, something as such, or maybe the 404 as not found, or maybe requested range not satisfiable, something as such you can give, and then customize this web page and give it from somewhere else as well. So for now, I'm not going to make use of this. So we are going to make it simple. So you can actually customize your own error page in case if user is trying to play around with the URL. Like let's say someone is trying to go to this one. Okay, sorry. Let's say someone is trying to remove this 0 from this and they're trying to access it. So instead of error being shown up like this, Maybe you can have a customized error page which says error 400, it is not accessible at this point of time. And then we have restrictions. So this is something that we need to really understand what happens in the restriction. Now if I go ahead and click on this geo restrictions and say edit, so it is going to ask you whether you would like to enable the restrictions or not. So currently it is not enabled. I'll click on yes, and the moment I click on yes, it's going to ask me whitelist or blacklist. When I say whitelist, which means whatever countries I am going to select, this CloudFront distribution will be available only for those countries itself. Like let's say if I want to say I want this to be available for some countries like Albania, Algeria, and maybe India, right? So maybe I just want this CloudFront distribution to be available only in these three countries and not elsewhere. So I can actually go ahead and say geo restriction whitelist and then add the countries so that this will be available only for these three countries only. Now let's say there can be a situation where you want to restrict it only for one specific country and to be available for rest of the world. That is where you will use the option which is called as blacklist. Now if I click on this India at this point of time, which means this is going to get blacklisted for India and rest of the world can actually use this CloudFront distribution. So someone from India who is trying to even access this CloudFront URL, they will not be able to access it because we have restricted this content in India and rest of the world it will be available. So you can either do one of them itself, either whitelist or blacklist. So if I say whitelist, now this is available only in India and rest of the world will not be able to view it. If I say blacklist, which means it will be available for the rest of world but not for India, right? So you can do any one of the settings itself, that is either whitelist or a blacklist. So for now I'm not going to enable this at this point. I'll click on cancel. And then we have something called as invalidations. So what does invalidation mean? Now it does sometimes happen that the image currently which you are seeing, right, this peacock, this walker.jpg image, someone might have updated this image as well, right? Let's see if I go down to this image. So let's say someone would have updated this diagram. Maybe he has added one more person here, or maybe he has also added the copyright mark, and some things are still added onto this. And it is being uploaded back to the S3 bucket saying that the image got updated. But will my CloudFront distribution know whether the image has been updated? No, it will not come to know because this content is now cached onto the nearest edge location for the one single day. So until unless this image doesn't expire, right, so till that point of time it is going to be available in this CloudFront distribution. So in case if you want to enable the users to be accessing the content which has been just published, you may have to actually create an invalidation request saying that I would like to actually remove this image from here. So I'll have to copy this content. I'll say that this specific image that walker.jpg is, I would like to invalidate it, right? Which means it is being deleted from all the CloudFront distributions. And now whenever the user is going to again ask for this walker.jpg image, it is going to get downloaded from the actual web server or S3 location with the new updates, and then the user will be able to see through the new updates as well, right? So invalidation is basically a kind of request where you can actually delete the content from the CloudFront edge locations, that is whatever is there available in the cache, you are trying to delete it. And then finally we have the tags. So in case if you want to give the tags so that you will be able to easily find out what all resources are actually created by you or your team, then in order to manage and organize the content, we use the tags. So that was all about the CloudFront distributions. Any questions or doubts here?
No, Paul.
Okay. So let's see. I'm not sure if AWS Training 18 will work in this case. So I'll just go ahead and try to check out. So we already have this. I'll try to make use of this domain name. Currently it is now in deployed state. So let's check it out. Yeah, so it's still not working. So as I said, sometimes it takes few minutes or sometimes it may take some hours together to get this updated. So currently this is working, that is walker.jpg is currently working because it's been couple of days I have been using this CloudFront distribution from, like, it's been spinned up on 12th of January, right? So it took a couple of days for this to get completely set up and then get started with, right? So that was all about the CloudFront distribution and the edge locations. So with this, we have completed the part of our application services as well. Now we are going to look forward in the next session with our AWS project. So we are going to implement a real-time WordPress server and see through how we can actually collaborate all of these services. So we have learned about VPC, we have learned about the CloudFront, we have learned about the Route 53, we have learned about the RDS database, we have learned about the S3 storage, we have learned about the EC2 in the computer sections. So we are going to make use of each and every service that we have learned till date, and we are going to collaborate all of them and then create one small project which is going to be a highly available architecture. So even if something goes down, my web server will be still available for the access for the end people, because it will be part of multiple availability zones. So even if one of the availability zone goes down, it will still be available for the access to the other users, right? So we are going to ensure that our project which we are going to build as a part of it, this WordPress servers, it is going to be highly available. And we are also going to make use of the auto scaling to see that whenever the load increases, automatically it is actually going to add up the servers to the existing situation as well. So we are going to make use of all the services that we have learned, and we are going to get started with the project part from tomorrow. So any questions or any doubts until here?
Yep, one Shiva here.
Yeah, sure.
Can we go with Ansible scripting or any other scripting tool?
Which one, Ansible or the?
Ansible. Do we have a chance to go along with Ansible?
Currently, no. In this part of the session, we are not going with the Ansible, because that is Ansible is more about the DevOps part. But if you want, we can have one overview session after our AWS thing. What all tools are important from the DevOps perspective? What each tool does? I can give you a very small example on each of the tools. What can be done with it, and how are they really important on the AWS? Because
Yeah.
whenever we are going to learn DevOps, the minimum requirement will be the AWS. So we should know the AWS prior before we jump into the DevOps. So I can give you an overview session on what happens in DevOps, what are the important tools that are to be learned, because in DevOps also again we have a lot of tools available in the market today. What are the tools that have got really value in the market at this point of time, and which of them are easier to learn through?
Okay. Okay, Paul, thank you.
Yeah, so we'll have an overview session maybe after the end, after the security white papers. I'll just have one session with you guys so that I'll explain you what happens in the DevOps, what do we actually do in it, how the automation work starts, and what are the important tools to be learned from the industry perspective for this. So that is it for today from my side, guys. Any more queries or questions before we close or wrap up the session? Okay, then thanks all. Have a great day. And tomorrow we'll start again early morning at 7 to continue with the part of the project in our AWS. Thanks all.
Thank you.